was diagnosed with something called first stage psychosis. I remember waking up one day and hearing this very strange voice in my head, and I just knew something was wrong.
Hi Jordan, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for taking the time to record this episode with us. I truly appreciate it. I started to follow you on LinkedIn, I would say a few months ago. And one of your posts especially came on my feed when you were talking about two things. You're talking about your business and your journey as an entrepreneur, but also about your mental health challenges. And I thought that was very brave, honestly, and I really want to acknowledge you from that, because sharing publicly on a platform when you have, I don't know, a lot of followers and stuff like that about personal struggles, it's not easy. I think it takes courage and also a lot of vulnerability to be able to put yourself out there and saying, this is me, this is who I am, with the ups and the downs. And I thought that was amazing, and that's why I started to follow you, and then I've been really enjoying your posts, because it's interesting how you share all the bits about you in terms of being an entrepreneur, being a web designer, and business content, as you would expect on the platform, but also talking about the challenges of being an entrepreneur and the challenging that you're facing in your personal life and stuff like that. So yeah, that's why I wanted to have you on the show, because I think you're bringing a very nice touch that I truly appreciate, and I would like to see more of that. So yeah, that's why.
Thank you, and I'm pretty honoured and humbled to be on my first podcast and talk about LinkedIn, life, just anything that comes to fancy, really.
So I guess my first question would be maybe more like on the personal side before we touch on the business, professional side of things, is, mental health is still sort of a taboo in a society, I feel. People don't speak that much about it. It's interesting because when we have, a broken arm or whatever, we are not scared to post on Instagram or LinkedIn about it, saying, I broke my arm and I'm going to the doctor and I'm getting surgery or whatever. But when we have mental health challenges, we tend to keep that for ourselves in general. And I wonder if what motivated you to start sharing on the platform about it? Is it because is it like an open topic for you based on your education, or I don't know, can you tell us a little bit about where is that coming from?
Well, I felt that not enough people were really talking about it in a genuine way with mental health. Of course, you've got mental health awareness days and months, and the odd post here and there about what you can do for employee mental health. But when it came to actually talking about how it affects you on a personal level, I didn't really see them that much. And especially with the mental health condition I had, still have, it was very isolating. So I thought, why not? I might as well post this out, get it out to the world and see where it goes from there. And with my story on LinkedIn, I was very happy the fact that other people reached out to me and they said, I saw your post and I actually can share it with other people now. I can share my own difficulties with mental health. It makes me feel better about myself. So that's something that I would say really helped in that retrospect. So
yeah. So could you tell us a little bit more about the mental health condition you just mentioned?
Sure. So in 2018, or summer 2018, I was diagnosed with something called first stage psychosis. And not too many people know about it. But the best way I can describe it is that first stage psychosis affects your perception of reality. So you could hear things that aren't there, you could see things that aren't there, and similar to schizophrenia, it's very, it can be very debilitating in that sense. When I first was diagnosed with the condition, it was one of the scariest, and it was just a terrible experience that I wish no one would have to go through. But I'm now 23, and it's now 2022, and it's taken me 4 years to start to have a full recovery.
And like when you were diagnosed in 2018, was that following like a tragic event that, I don't know, triggered the condition, or is it something you've always been living with but you didn't have a name to a label on it?
I would say it was mostly from a trigger of stress. Beforehand, my life was the polar opposite. I was working in a job I really liked. I was earning decent money for my age. I was studying for my CIM qualification, which is this kind of prestigious marketing qualification, if you've heard about it in the UK, that we can take. So my life was really good, but I was under a ton of stress. So I had stress from doing my exam. My home life wasn't good because there's still arguing and noise. Then I was also dealing with past trauma and abuse that happened to me when I was a kid. And this all compounded, and I remember waking up one day at 4:30 a.m. I don't know why I remember the exact time, but I remember waking up at the time and hearing this very strange voice in my head. And I just knew something was wrong.
And how did you react to it in the first place? You know, did you straight away decided to, I don't know, like go to see a doctor to talk about it, or did you feel more like, I don't know, I'm going through a burnout and I just have to wait a little bit and it's going to pass? Like, what was your reaction to it? Because it must be very confusing, I'm assuming.
My reaction was probably the second one, so I just assumed, it's just a burnout, it's nothing serious, I was kind of hesitant to admit I had something wrong with me. I was actually more kind of in denial as well, because everything before that point was going so well, and I was doing so many good habits for myself, and I was on the right track. It kind of confused me. I remember going to work, and my manager, who sits on the table pretty much opposite to me so we can see each other working, he looks at me and he says, "Jordan, are you okay? You look very pale." And I said, no, I'm okay. I just need some water. I get water, then I can still hear these voices and all of this crazy stuff still happening in my head. And I remember him talking to me with genuine concern, saying, "Okay, you need to go home. Something's not right." And that's the first time someone said that to me while I was working. So I think after that point, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know exactly what it was.
Right. And how challenging, and I mean, assuming it was challenging, but how difficult was it to go through the process of figuring out what was happening, understanding the condition and stuff like that? Like, how long did that take, and what was the process about it?
So the whole process would kind of happen by accident, because I remember staying home for a month because I was given a month's annual leave to try and sort out my mental health. So I was thinking, okay, this should be okay. I'll just play video games, binge Netflix, the casual stuff people do.
Yeah.
But because it was a constant daily battle with me and my mind, I just couldn't relax. I couldn't. I remember being scared to use the bathroom because of how intense it was. And it got to the stage where one of my mom's friends, who I knew by accident, she had connections with the NHS mental health team in Shropshire. And I went to her and said, "Okay, I don't know what's wrong. I need to self-refer myself." So it got to the stage where I was self-referred to a mental hospital. Went to the mental hospital, and then they gave me the diagnosis from there.
If any time you don't feel comfortable answering a question, by the way, like, feel free to tell me, okay?
Okay.
But can you try to explain to us, like, what was going through your mind and you know, what was, I don't know, this voice and this, like you said, like a different sense of reality, like how, like, can you tell us, like, give us some example of what was happening and those conversations you were having?
Sure. So the voices, it started as a narrator. A lot of people with the condition also talk about this. So you have like a narration voice that basically talks about everything you do. So if I pick up a pen, we're like, oh, okay, Jordan picked up a pen. And you kind of brush off for the first few hours because you think, okay, this is kind of funny. Why do I have this voice narrating everything about me? But it starts to get annoying where it's everything, and it starts to, for me, transform from narration to just pure insults. So we all have the inner critic, and either can berate us or push us forward. But my kind of inner critic transformed into this horrible, just bully in a sense, where it was like, oh, okay, you're stupid. I'm not stupid. Yes, you are. You are stupid. You're fat. You're ugly. You're whatever insult. And that's just kind of on the surface level. It got very bad when the weeks commenced. But my relationship with the voices deteriorated very fast, and it made me appreciate how fragile the human mind really is.
Yeah. And how did that affect your relationship with other people? Were you like, I don't know, staying on your own and isolating yourself because of what was happening, or did you have a good support system around you to help you go through that?
So I would just isolate myself because when the days passed as well, I thought other people could talk to me in my mind. So when I'd go outside, I thought other people were controlling the voices somehow, or they were the voices, and it just made me shut off a lot of people and just be very closed off to the point where I was afraid of going outside. I'd just stay inside. So how we had the COVID lockdowns, you could say that was pretty much me for a long time.
Yeah. And on one of your LinkedIn posts, I remember reading that at some point, I think it was in 2018, you even thought, and I think even tried maybe to take your own life, right? Because you're so feeling bad. Like, can you tell us a little about this episode, if you okay with it?
Yeah. So I remember trying to, commit suicide around 6 times. Luckily, I failed every time. But it was so difficult because I was like, okay, if all these voices are saying all these bad things about me, and if my life is just gonna like be like this, I'm okay just ending it. And my mentality was kind of very, I've kind of lived my best life. I don't care anymore, which isn't like the best mentality to have because life is so precious and you never know what's going to happen next. But not everyone sees it like that. So I remember one attempt which scares me the most, where I was in the mental hospital, and how would you have trousers? I tried to strangle myself with the trouser legs, and then trying to suffocate myself. Luckily, there's staff there that stopped me, but I just felt so helpless about the situation. I just wanted it to end.
Wow.
And then in terms of recovery or receiving help, are you on medication? Is it more kind of speech, talking help? And psychologists and that kind of thing that helps. What kind of help have you been getting over the past 4 years?
I'm lucky because I've received tremendous help from the Shropshire Early Intervention team and also the crisis team. And I'm still on medication now, but I received medication. I obviously received help in the mental hospital. I was also assigned a support worker to just talk about things and say, you're not alone and we can get through this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting what you just said about not being alone, because I mean, from my understanding and what you say, you're isolating yourself. And I think more like generally speaking, when as human being we go through a rough patch and like a difficult time, any sort of challenge, we tend usually to feel very lonely, to feel like, why is it happening to me? And it's very hard in some situations to realize and see that there are other people out there going through the same things, because also it's not talked about enough. And that's why we would like to do that. So I guess understanding that you were not alone in this situation and you had a support system around you must have been feeling really good, no? Like emotionally speaking.
Yeah, I wasn't used to it in a good way though. So it helped me get me back on my feet and realize that there are good people out there. It's not just me fighting myself, and there is, as cheesy as it says, they always say this, but it does get better.
Yeah.
It's true, because I never used to believe it, but it is true.
Yeah.
And then I'm curious, so you said you're still on medication now, so have the voices stopped, or is it just that there's less, or they're nicer, or how does that process work now? Like, how has it changed now? So
I'm still in contact with the support teams, but I'm pretty much stable now. I might have the odd voice here and there, but it's been more than a year now since I've really heard anything. So the medication is just there just to make sure everything's just stays stable and fine.
So all this burnout episode and the condition started in 2018. How long did it take from that to, for lack of a better word, go back to a normal routine and get back into your life? How long did it take, especially with COVID in the middle? That must have been complicated. But
I would say around a year and a half. So it was a long, painful journey that is something I knew I needed to take to just recreate my life, pretty much.
It's like you said also, it's when you're going through it at the moment, when you're in this dark place, and especially if it's lasting more than a year. I mean, it's 1 year when you're not feeling well. It's a very long time. It's very hard to realize and to get the awareness that things are gonna get better. Like it's always easier to look at it after, and once you've done the work, you can see that things can get better. But when your vision is closed and when you're into it, it's really, really hard to imagine any, I guess, light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, 100%.
So in 2019, 2020, when you're getting out of this very hard episode, what did you decide in terms of your life? Because if life was, I mean, it's interesting, you're doing great, but life was very stressful. What changes did you decide to implement in your life not to get back into this, very stressful and anxious situation?
So one change that I studied today is a gratefulness diary. And I think apparently Barack Obama, a few other world leaders and other people do this, where they break out a diary and they write down 5 things that they're grateful for each day. And it could be something very simple like seeing the sunset or being able to read or just having clean water or medicine. Or it could be anything. It just makes you appreciate the smaller things in life or things we just take for granted.
Yeah. And in terms of like professional situation, for example, or stuff like that, did you make a total switch to work in a less stressful environment, or how did you approach that?
To be honest, I didn't make the full switch of changing my job role that much, because at the time I was, I want to say 21. So I was still at the verge of not knowing exactly what I wanted to do or to do with my career. So I still went to job just to see what would work out, essentially.
But like did you change your relationship with job in terms of your involvement and your managing your stress? Because I feel it's interesting, like the corporate world can be very tricky in a sense that we live in a society where it's always like, getting a promotion, getting more money, and being the best at what we do or stuff like that. And that can be very stressful, like on a personal level, and it can also invade our personal space. So did you have the tools and the awareness not to get trapped into this vicious circle?
Oh, I see. I would say I definitely had more awareness than before. And I just stopped taking my job so seriously. Because at the end of the day, work is work. And I feel like you've got two sets of people who live to work and people who work to live. And I want to basically just fit my work around my life. Because life is way too short. We don't have infinite amount of time to make money. Then when we make money, it's like, what are we actually going to do with it? It reminds me of something someone said. I can't remember who quoted this, but are you going to remember the memories and the people you meet, or are you going to remember the crap that you buy?
Yeah, that helps put things in perspective and like you said before, like realize what's important in life. And yeah, it's interesting. The gratitude journal helps because that it's true. We take water for granted, and it's always when you go to a country where you don't have tap water, then you're like, oh, how lucky am I to be able to just get a glass of water just like that. And yeah, writing it down helps to make it real and to bring it up, because we don't pay attention to the little details that I have internet and I have a computer and I can connect to people all over the world by just being in my bedroom and stuff like that. Like those are things that is just so normal for us now that we need to appreciate it, because it's a privilege that we have. So now you created your company, Strike Moon, and you are like a web designer. What was the process of jumping into this crazy adventure of becoming an entrepreneur? Because that's also stressful.
That's very true. So I just thought to myself one day, I've always had this dream of making something for the world or just being an entrepreneur, but I've never kind of acted on it. So my contract at my previous workplace was ending. I didn't want to work in marketing again because I was doing that for 6 years. And I thought to myself, why don't I just try making this company? If I fail, then, I fail. But if I actually make a success out of this, then I wouldn't regret it. So I've always kind of had the name Strike Moon kind of bookmarked from years ago. Reused it for this. Then was like, let's just do it. Let's just start this company and see where it goes.
Why did you pick this name? Is there a story behind it?
So back in, I want to say 2015, 2016, this is when I was starting to fully make decent websites, I'd say. I needed to make a portfolio for my graphic design work, and I was scrolling through names, and for some reason this name Strike Moon just popped up in my head. I'm thinking, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. Check the domain, and just registered it.
Right. Okay.
If you actually go on Wayback Machine and check the history of the domain, you might be able to see my old website from years ago, which it doesn't look too good now. But, it's still there in the history vaults.
Yeah.
So we chose the name Strike Moon, and I just felt a connection to it.
That's cool. And like I mentioned at the beginning, we have this, I think, especially at the moment, this idea of entrepreneurship is the best thing in the world. You can work whenever you want, make a lot of money, work from anywhere in the world, and it's all, unicorn and rainbows and stuff like that, and it's perfect world. And I think a lot of people don't realize actually how hard it is, especially when you get started with nothing. You don't have like a huge capital, you don't have a massive investment of money, you have no client, you have no paycheck, you need to do everything yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about the reality and your personal journey of starting the business from scratch?
So like you said, it's pretty much you are the business. So any job or role or task is down to you. And I think people sell you this fake lifestyle of financial freedom all the time, financial freedom and like time freedom, because it's what makes money. It's what people want. They want to buy into that dream lifestyle, but they don't want to put in the 16-hour work weeks and work days, I should say. They don't want to put in that ridiculous grind that affects your mental health, that affects your physical health. So for me, I kind of had a perspective of, I know what I'm getting myself into. I know it's going to be just hard and grind and no one's going to care about me at the start. And I have to do everything, even the boring tasks, and just learn a lot. But as you said, the expectations and reality of being an entrepreneur is still very skewed. And I think people on social media don't help at all. They probably make it worse. So that's what I'd say in terms of actually being an entrepreneur.
I think as well, like you said about having to do everything, even the boring jobs, I think that's something that isn't shown on social media. Like, you have to do your own finances and your own taxes and your own invoices and your own, like, all the, like, yeah, you can do all the creative fun stuff, but you also have to do all the boring stuff, and that's not often shown. That, like, this is the reality. We're working on a Sunday evening or a whatever, like, yeah, I think it's interesting how it's perceived as like this dream lifestyle, and actually when you get into it, it's not all that great.
Yeah. I think I remember, like, there is a famous quote, I think, and I don't know where it's coming from, but about something along the line of, I thought I was leaving my 9-to-5 job to be able to work whenever I want, and now I just work every time, something like that.
Yeah.
Because it's true, like, there's no weekend, there's no evening, and you just need to get it done, whatever it takes, right? That's how you succeed. But was it challenging? Like, so you've been an entrepreneur for how long now?
I only started in May this year, so very young.
So it's, I mean, from an outsider point of view, and looking at your LinkedIn profile and the posting, the following stuff, like, it looks like you found a good system. Like, you have something good in place, because from just like looking at your posts and everything, it looks like, the business is going towards the right direction, right?
I would say so. There's been a lot of difficulties for sure. So getting stuff paid on time, getting clients to pay on time. I think every business goes through that. Making sure that I'm organised and tasks are getting done, and making sure that I sign the right amount of time for stuff. Time management's always been kind of a difficulty for me ever since I've been in school. So having to sit down and say, okay, we're going to assign 2 hours to just sit down and work on this task has been it's been a bit alien for me. But it's going well. I'm getting a good amount of attention. But in the future, I am looking to not just build websites, but to teach people. And that's always been one of my dreams. So it doesn't matter if people want a website built by me or not. I can just help them get the best solutions out there.
Right. And would you say that, what do you find the most stressful? The job that you had before working for other people, or this new entrepreneurial journey? Like how do you balance it, and in terms of stress and anxiety and stuff like that?
That's a really good question. I'd say both of them are kind of on an equal level of stress. For me, I know other people will disagree, but when you're working for somebody else, you've got deadlines to meet, you've got performance targets to meet, you've got all these kind of metrics that you've got to hit, otherwise you get fired. Likewise, though, with a business, you've got the same kind of targets to meet, but there's no one to hold you accountable apart from you. And I think that's where stress can come from, because if you're procrastinating, if you're not doing the work, you can kind of work out that, okay, I'm not doing too well and I need to pull my bootstraps up. So there is, I'd say, equal level of stress, but because I enjoy what I enjoy doing in terms of making websites, I don't find that stressful at all. The stressful thing is the admin and making sure everything's up to date and everything else that comes with it.
Yeah, I feel it as a good stress and bad stress in a way. And yeah, I think a situation can be very stressful, but if it's something that first you choose for yourself, and also it's something that you enjoy doing every day, I think you manage this good stress much better than if it's every day and seeing people that you hate every day. I'm going to the extreme, but this is much harder to manage this kind of bad stress, obviously. So it's more like, two different situations, I feel.
Yeah, I totally agree. And with the whole good stress, bad stress, it reminds me of this one time when I was working for a company. I can't say the name because I don't want to get sued. But it was stressful, not because of the actual job, but because of the people there. So we had a manager who'd sit at this desk who could basically see everyone else working. And she would openly berate and just insult people. She thought they weren't working hard enough. It was a terrible kind of toxic workplace that you just didn't want to be in. It's kind of the place where to take a break, you'd have to take a smoke break. I don't smoke myself, but and it just reminds me of that stress because you hate going there, you hate people, and you don't want to be there. In terms of good stress, which could be from exercising, for example, where you've still got that stress, but it's good for you and you're making progress.
Yeah. So when you were, you're still very young, but when you were younger, I'm curious just to understand a little bit more. Did you have any, to link both topic, did you have any education and interest and knowledge about how to manage your mental health and also about entrepreneur, or those two topics were very foreign to you, they were for most of the population, because this is not something we are usually taught at school. But were you familiar with both of the things or not really?
That's a good question. No, not at all. When I was in school, they didn't teach you about being an entrepreneur or mental health. Mental health had more of a stake in the back then than it does now. If you had mental health, you either classified as crazy or as an attention seeker. People didn't take you seriously. With entrepreneurship as well, it was kind of the same thing where if you said, okay, I want to run my own business, people would just laugh you out the building or just say, it's not going to happen, just get a 9-to-5 job, what are you doing? And I feel like that definitely needs to change in our global education system, where people have a better understanding about entrepreneurship, mental health, but also stuff like finance, fitness, just other really important topics that are just neglected.
Yeah.
Things like taxes and savings, and like there's so many things that we have to do as society. Well, I guess savings you don't have to do, but it's good to do. But like you're just not taught about as a child as like, oh, by the way, you should save X percentage of your income for a rainy day. Like we're just not. Yeah, I completely agree. There's so much we're not told about at school.
Yeah. And when you first went on LinkedIn to speak about that, and you first posted about I'm creating my own business, or even the day that you started to, okay, I'm going to be talking about myself and I'm going to put myself out there to share my very intimate personal struggles, wasn't it terrifying to click on a post button?
Absolutely. I think, like most people, I had this kind of voice in my head saying, okay, is anyone going to care? Are people just going to tell me to, shut up or say, oh, this isn't LinkedIn, this is Facebook or something? I just had a lot of self-doubt about posting, and it just kind of took me a moment to say, okay, if no one cares and if people tell me to shut up, then fine. But if I don't post, I will never know. So I might as well try.
That's a very good lesson. Yeah. It's interesting how we are, because ultimately you got the opposite reaction of that, right? You got people reaching out and saying thank you and saying how helpful that was. But it's interesting how, to go back to what you said before about the inner critic, like we are so hard on ourselves and so sometimes scared to do things because of our own conversations, and because we get caught up into those conversations with the ego or whatever you want to call it, and it's amazing to see the result, right? After posting that and getting more into it, now you have people reaching out and saying thank you and stuff like that. It must be pretty reconforting, especially after everything you've been through, feeling alone and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. I was surprised with how supportive people were on LinkedIn. I remember being on LinkedIn a few years before, and it's a completely different platform. It's a very kind of dry, corporate kind of platform you'd expect, where everyone would try to sell you something, or if they weren't trying to sell you something, they're trying to message you about a person who could sell you something.
Yeah.
Now it's very kind of, it's very open, and you get to find out more about people, which I like. So to have that support on LinkedIn was very, I don't know the word for it, but it was nice to have.
Yeah. I think we tend to, and that might be a generational thing, but I feel like nowadays we tend to, I think as a customer, let's say I'm going to speak for myself, as a customer, I like to know who's behind the business, and I care about who's behind the business. And you might have an amazing business, but if you're not a good person, like maybe I would go somewhere else. I'd rather work with good people than with just a good business in a way. And I think this is why people are reaching out and connecting, because we all go through shit in life. Like, we need to stop pretending that life is perfect. And I think by sharing your stories, you are allowing people to relate to you and to realize that they are not alone, like you felt alone before, because other people are going through mental health experience or whatever it is. Actually, it doesn't matter. And you're creating a space for people to be okay with who they are and what they are. And I think, that's human connection. And if you connect with people, there's no reason that if one day they need a website done, they will reach out to you because they remember the human being behind the company.
Yeah, I think that's very true. You see it more with bigger brands now, where instead of being corporate, they're trying to reach out in a more human level, especially on Twitter and other platforms, where instead of just saying, "Hey, we've got this thing for you to buy," and no one cares. But instead, they're like, "Hey, they might make a joke about themselves or be self-aware." So as you said, people nowadays are way more aware with who they're buying from and the person that's behind the logo or the face of the brand. So
I wonder also, like, did you have any, because I know social media can be very also extreme in a good and in a bad way. Did you have any trolls, some people giving you shit for opening up and being vulnerable?
Surprisingly, not at the moment. I think it's going to happen soon. But if I had a bigger following on LinkedIn, that probably would happen. I have seen it before, where people will comment something like, "This isn't Facebook, why are you saying this?" Or, "This is another sob story." It seems to be a contrast to LinkedIn, where people are posting about mental health, then you get people posting about mental health and criticizing them and saying, "Oh, we don't want this on here," and stuff like that. But I haven't got any trolls yet giving me shit. But it's due to happen, probably in the future.
Because it's always complicated when you are openly and vulnerably sharing about a topic and with good intention, right? Because it's coming from a good place and you're doing it to help other people. And you have just a bunch of people that are probably going through their own shit, just taking it out on you. It's just never fun, right? So it can be difficult to keep going when you have those sorts of comment. And I mean, this is something that you've been going through on YouTube, for example. So even if you have just to ignore them, we're all human, and it still affects us because we care about what people think ultimately, even if we shouldn't. But
it's true. I read somewhere as well. This is very interesting. The reason why words hurt us so much is because it physically hurts us, which sounds a bit weird, and you're thinking, "What's that on about?" But apparently, in our defense mechanism, when somebody says something bad against you, your heart rate rises, you start to feel anxious, and that's kind of been hardwired from evolution as kind of defense. So it kind of ties into why when you see trolls or people just giving you shit online, it does hurt in a way.
Yeah, it's the like fight and flight system, and the body reacts in a way that it's like, it's triggering whether you like it or not.
Emotional response.
Yeah. So maybe just to wrap it up a little bit, like, what is your relationship with mental health in a way that, I'm sure, like many of us, it was a taboo before something happened to you, for lack of a better word. Are you now okay to discuss mental health and and obviously raise awareness around it? And do you feel much more comfortable with the whole topic, or is it still quite difficult to navigate?
I feel way more comfortable just talking about it, just to anyone now, because I know I'm more aware that mental health affects more people than it's recorded. I feel like every person on earth is going through some sort of mental health difficulty, or they might have some issues here and there. As you said before, life throws off shit at us. And to say that somebody lives their whole life and they're not depressed one time, or they haven't been sad, or they haven't felt a bit different is just unrealistic. So I feel like sharing my story and talking about it helps other people talk about their story as well and say, hey, I've went through depression or anxiety or whatever else it is. And it just helps them feel better about themselves and know that they're not alone, and there are people who will support you through it.
And maybe like to go back to something you said before, but if someone listening is going through a difficult path at the moment, and maybe they're thinking about ending the life or stuff like that, like some thoughts that you had as well before, like what, through your personal story, like what would you say, which advice would you give to people that are going through something difficult like that and they're very confused about how to navigate it?
That's a good question. I'd probably say two things. So all pain ends. I know it doesn't seem like it in the moment. It really hurts, and you just want everything to end, and you're confused and tired and just fed up. And I've been there. I've done that. I have the t-shirt, but it does end, and there's always something better in the future. And the second piece of advice I would say is just find somebody who you can trust, or just someone to talk to. They don't need to give any advice to you. They don't need to be a therapist or anything like that. Just anyone that you can find just to rant or just to share your experience with, without any judgment, without any fear that they're going to pick on you or anything like that. And I feel like once you have those two things, it's the first step in recovery.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jordan, for sharing your experience and talking to us and kind of sharing, what your illness is all about, because I didn't know about it personally, and it's interesting to hear different people's stories and experiences with different things. So thank you so much for talking about it and for bringing awareness. And I think it's also worth mentioning as well, I think it's different when men talk about mental health compared to when women do. I think it's more acceptable for women to talk about it. It's almost like women are perceived as the more, what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, like emotional.
Yeah, emotional. Yeah. It's kind of more like, as a child, I feel like girls are generally brought up to be more emotional. It's okay to show your emotions, whereas boys,
and expressing
the
feelings.
Stop crying, get over it, be a man. So I think it's really important that we get more men talking about their mental health and things that they go through. So I really want to applaud you for doing that.
Thank you.
Before we end the episode, we have one last question for you. It's a question we ask every guest at the end of the show. If you could have a conversation with anybody, dead or alive, famous or not, who you think is like the most interesting person ever, who would you like to talk to and why?
That's a very good question.
First thing coming to your head.
The first thing, I'd say my granddad, to be honest. I feel like most people might choose someone famous because they're interesting, but as a kid, I never really got the chance to talk to him. And when he passed away, it felt like I didn't really have this. It felt like part of me passed away when he passed away, is what I'm trying to say. And growing up, I didn't have a father figure. My dad was in and out of the house. He was there when we didn't want him. when we did want him, he was never there. So, but just to talk to him and see what his life was like, his experiences, and just to see what wisdom he would have.
Yeah. Thank you. We actually had this answer much more often than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Like you said, I was expecting most people to say someone famous, and we actually get the grandfather or grandmother answer surprisingly often, which is nice, to be honest. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jordan, once again for your time, but also for your courage and vulnerability and openness to talk about that, because it's a very intimate and personal topic, and opening up to strangers that you've never met and to people listening and watching online is far from easy. It takes, I think, a lot of guts and courage. So I really want to thank you truly for that, for doing this with us. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. For anybody who has been watching or listening, we will leave Jordan's information in the show notes in the description box if you want to go and talk to him about anything, or also hire him. Yeah, we can do some work for you. So we'll leave all of your information, Jordan, in the info box and show notes and everything else. Yeah. But thank you for everybody for listening and for watching. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Thank you so much, Jordan, for being here and sharing your story. We really, really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.